Good afternoon, everybody. So it's post-lunch, right? So thought might as well kick-start the post-lunch session literally with a kick. So come to think of it, what would happen if there were to be a real kick in the virtual world? So this is a story of a guy who one fine day walks into a mall and he gets to wear a head-mounted device, dons a pair of headphones, and he goes through a roller coaster ride, literally. So hang in there and just see what happens here.
Алеша готовится к полету.
О, привет!
Poor guy doesn't know what he's getting into.
Алеша, с катертью дорога.
So he goes there on the top and let's see what happens. So the reason why I showed you the video is not just because it's fun or entertaining, right? In fact, the day this video got uploaded on YouTube, it broke the internet. The reason why I showed you the video is that it's educational, informative, probably even insightful. Now, why do I say that? I say that because it brings to life two very powerful concepts. When sound is directional, when there is imagery that surrounds you, and when there is one-to-one head motion tracking that's done really well, you achieve what is called as immersion. That's a very powerful piece of experience. So powerful that it can sometimes even lead to a subconscious shift in your point of view. Now, the moment your brain starts to believing in this new point of view, we achieve what we call as presence. The video that you just saw was one of the very fine examples wherein somebody was able to experience both immersion and presence. Now, why were we talking about these concepts? We are talking about these concepts because we have this thesis. We believe that the closer we get to interacting with computers, just like we would intuitively interact with each of us, the experience would become even more powerful. Now, what do I mean by that? I would like to think of it like the story of the arc of human-computer interface. Assume humanity were to be at one end of the equation and computers were to be at the other end. And every single time we saw a layer of abstraction getting removed between us and computers, every single time we took a step forward towards interacting with computing a little bit more intuitively, we saw computers becoming significantly more useful, valuable, relevant, and we in turn became significantly more productive. So for example, when computers were born way back in the days of ones and zeros, the only way for us to communicate with computers was by literally rewiring them. No wonder then computers were confined to some of the highest end laboratories in the world, a handful of them. A decade later, we figured a means to communicate with computers through punching cards, which was a bit of a progress, and for the first time we saw computers getting into the realm of the enterprise. A decade later, for the first time ever, we figured a means to communicate with computers through English language, aka the command line interface, and that spawned several programming and scripting languages that we almost take for granted today. And then we saw computers getting into colleges, schools, and universities, and people started to program them to kind of do various kinds of tasks. It was actually in the 90s that the real breakthrough happened with the advent of graphical user interface. That's when we kind of managed to remove several layers of abstractions, and we started to communicate with them a little more intuitively, a little more naturally. And then for the first time ever, no wonder then, we saw computers getting into our homes. And people started to use computers for various purposes, right from, say, creating school reports to designing jet engines. And over the last decade, I'm sure each one of us in this room have been a participant in this revolution of smartphones, wherein computers became accessible to our palms, literally, right? And the result is for everybody of us to see. We have around more than 300 million Indians who take this computing for granted. More than 300 million Indians who use this computing for practically every single purpose in life, almost. So far as we have come, we still believe that there are some layers of abstractions between us and computers. Now imagine this. What if instead of having had to constantly stare at our screens or checking our mails, what if we were to hold our heads up into the real and the virtual worlds around us? What if we were able to interact with things just by looking at them? What if information were to be right here in this context, with computing getting interwoven seamlessly into the environment all around us? We believe that this is going to be the next inevitable step in the arc of computing interfaces. At Google, we call it as immersive computing. Now look at it this way, look at it like a spectrum, right? Wherein at one end of the spectrum you have reality as we know it, and I hope it is. And the other end of the spectrum we have computer-generated reality, which is virtual reality. And somewhere along the spectrum we have digital artifacts and digital information overlaid on this current context that we all have, which could be called as augmented reality. I find it easier to remember it this way, wherein augmented reality is something that can bring anything to you right here within your context. And virtual reality is something that could take me anywhere. Now let me kind of bring these concepts to life to a few examples. And let me start by showing you a conventional 2D piece of content. And I show this because it is really close to my heart. This is an incredibly smart piece of work recently in India, and I'll kind of tell you why I showed this to you. Simple and elegant, right? I really loved how the brand kind of brought the idea of travel breaks to life. Now imagine what if we were able to virtually transport somebody to this very place. What if we were able to give him or her the ability to explore the magic of that very space at their own convenience? At Google, we have been able to take this idea to life to 1 million plus students all around the world through this program called as Google Expeditions. Let me kind of show you a quick video that kind of brings it to life.
My name is Lance Teesling. I'm in middle school in Eagle Grove, Iowa. Eagle Grove is not a very tall place. It's actually very flat. This is the tallest building on Main Street. It is about 50 feet tall. When I grew up, I want to be an architect and design skyscrapers. Yesterday at school, we went on a class trip, but this was not a normal trip with buses. This was something very different. The very first expedition we went on was to the Burj Khalifa.
Go ahead and grab 2 hands and put them up to your face.
It's so tall.
Okay, we're gonna go to the 153rd floor.
Or what if each of us, instead of being a passive viewer of a movie trailer, were to actually convert the smartphones that we have in all our hands into magic vans so that we could explore and immerse ourselves in the fantasy world of a movie called as, say, Fantastic Beasts, right? Or what if we were able to use those very smartphones and bring to life newer dimensions of conventional, traditional media channels like out of home, right? So there was this partnership that we had with Star Wars, using which we explored various avenues in which AR could be used. In fact, we even took it a step forward and we launched what we call as AR stickers, and we had a lot of fun, a lot of learnings as part of that one, and I couldn't resist the urge to show you some piece of work that we made to promote it. Here it goes.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power, and beyond that, something truly special.
Something inside me has always been there.
But now it's awake, and I need help.
Let the past die. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
The Force is yours. The Last Jedi AR stickers, only on the Google Pixel camera.
Incidentally, these got launched exactly a month ago, by the way. But why are we talking about these? Why are we talking about AR and VR today? In fact, you might recall that many of the speakers as part of vdonxt have alluded to this one, right? Today, we live in a media clutter world. The more growth you see in terms of media options that we have, we see that it's inversely proportional to the attention spans that we have. So one thing is for certain, for media to be truly effective, it has to be ultra compelling and super immersive. And we believe that that's exactly the strength for formats like AR and VR. Why? The philosophy is simple. Greater immersion leads to better engagement, and better engagement could lead to better brand outcomes. In fact, this was the same philosophy that motivated us to work on several experiments, pilots, and efforts over the last 1 year, and we had very encouraging results to start with. Be it AR stickers, the kind of sneak preview that you have seen, or VR 360 ads, or three-dimensional display ads. In almost every single piece of project, every single project that we embarked on, every single time that we mounted a measurement, we have seen that the results were really, really encouraging. Right? And we believe that it's going to be having a real life, a real world meaning for brands. And why do I say that? I say that fundamentally because of a few reasons. To start with, reach, right? Today, the reach for formats of AR and VR are by definition the reach of the smartphones that we all have. For example, the AR stickers that we have seen would be having a reach of around 1 billion devices globally in 2018. And if I were to give an India example, if I were to talk about VR, every single piece of VR 360 content that is uploaded on YouTube would, by definition, have the reach of YouTube today, which is greater than 200 million. Now, what do I mean by that one? What I mean by that one is that if there is a piece of content on YouTube, it would not necessarily require an additional piece of head-mounted device. It would not require an additional hardware gear for you to experience it in 360. In fact, we call it as magic window experience. Right? So one is reach. The second one, as we have seen, AR and VR kind of bring to life newer marketing channels. For example, we have seen AR stickers, which are newer layers and would help brand to kind of create new touch points. Or it could also bring alive newer dimensions to traditional channels. We have just seen how out-of-home could be converted into a location-specific activation. We have seen how a VR 360 video could convert itself into a story-living experience. Or probably how a display ad could become a three-dimensional shopping experience. Which would all eventually, obviously, lead to a higher engagement, higher immersion, higher kind of relationship from a consumer standpoint with the channel, and which would eventually lead to higher sales. So what do we have? A quick 101 of sorts in terms of the formats in VR space, right? Again, if we were to look at it like a spectrum, wherein at one end of the spectrum we have mass reach and bite-size level engagement, and the other end of the spectrum you have early adopter level kind of reach and highly immersive engagement. At the mass reach level, we have obviously what I've said as the magic window experience, which means that any piece of VR 360 content that you upload, it automatically lends itself to a monoscopic 3D experience, if it's a 3D content, or if into a monoscopic experience. And if this smartphone is subsequently placed in a cardboard, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment, it very neatly lends itself to a stereoscopic experience. Right? So again, the reach that we are talking about is equivalent to the reach of smartphones and internet and YouTube as of today. Right? Along the spectrum, we have something called as web VR, which essentially helps any creator to upload content and be able to share that experience using a single URL so that it can neatly, seamlessly lend itself across various devices, be it laptop or mobile or a tablet. Right? And a step ahead into the spectrum is cardboard. Now, cardboard is very special to us, very close to our hearts. Because something that has begun as a hack kind of project is today the single largest VR platform. Something that is accessible, something that is smartphone ready. All that's required is, regardless of your model of smartphone, just put in there and then it will neatly lend itself to a stereoscopic experience. Anyway, we are not in the business of selling cardboards. We have open source the design of a cardboard, and there are several manufacturers around the world who have tied up with content creators, brands, and they have been used for all kinds of situations, right from advertising to activation. In fact, there have been around 10 million cardboards shipped across the world. And it gives me immense pride to tell you that India is the second largest market in the world in terms of cardboard app installs. And then along the spectrum, any which way, we have slightly premium devices, be it Daydream viewer or PlayStation viewer, etc. Right? By the way, this is not just a fancy version of a cardboard. A Daydream viewer has been designed from grounds up in order to facilitate a longer duration, smooth, seamless VR experience. So much so that it works with a pre-identified set of high-end smartphones, which have been proven to have highest end hardware specs in terms of resolution, graphics, display, so that somebody can kind of very neatly, very easily immerse themselves and kind of engage with content for a longer duration. And if I were to kind of stack it up in terms of relative scale, relative production investment that you might require, one thing is for clear. And probably that's why over the last 1.5 years, we have been seeing brands or content creators focusing at the reach, mass end of the spectrum. Why? Because the reasons are simple, right? It gives them massive reach. It gives them means to kind of engage with their end users with minimal production investment. In fact, in India, we have had one of the recent experiences, one of the recent examples is Flipkart ad, and we have liked many things about it, right? And I'm sure many of you would have seen this. For starters, it had a recognizable music track. It had a recognizable face. And what I really liked was how they subtly kind of placed and peppered around the video hints and cues, encouraging the viewer to kind of turn around and discover and kind of interact with the video in the 360 space. And every single time we have seen such smart, elegant attempts, be it an ad, be it a content creator, we have seen, and every single time we have mounted a measurement exercise and we compared the result in terms of how did this 360 piece of content perform in versus its 2D Hazin, the result has been almost consistently been the same. A 360 VR piece of content has been proven to drive significantly lift in terms of view through, lift in terms of engagement, lift in terms of the completion rates. So how can we help? If you have a compelling creative vision and if you have access to talent, if you have access to IP, if you have access to distribution, we can help you in terms of hardware and software. We have invested significant amount of resources over the last several years, and we have managed to kind of establish, and we're still working on in terms of even fine-tuning, right? Hardware. So we can ship, we can get 360 cameras shipped and give it out to you for the duration of the shoot. So you can just focus on your piece of content and don't worry and not worry necessarily about the hardware. Software, by the way, tends to be even more expensive, even more resource intensive, even more cost prohibitive in terms of investments from any content creator if they were to produce a 360 piece of content. In fact, I personally know of projects wherein people managed to shoot content in 360, but then they had to cancel it midway through because they couldn't kind of get optimal stitching and assembly, right? Again, we are happy to take care of that one. All you need to do is, we could be giving you access to what we call as jump editor, jump manager, where the idea is you just upload your content in 24 hours, you'll get a stitched piece of content back to you, right? So hardware and software and also kind of helping you in terms of getting the nuances right, in terms of how could you use a platform like YouTube to amplify your piece of content. Over the last 12 months, I could give you an example from a market like US, and we're literally kickstarting it in the Indian market now. Over the last 12 months, we had tied up with several partners in the US. As you could see, these partners included players in verticals like journalism. For example, New York Times, which actually made a piece of 360 video every single day of the year, like journalism, entertainment, sports, and music, right? And I really wish I could kind of bring to life a 360 experience, but as you know, a 360 experience is something that you'll have to see it for yourself. So the next best thing that I can do is to show you a sizzle reel of sorts that kind of gives you a visceral feel in terms of how these videos look like. So here it goes.
This is my Met dress from 2 years ago.
I know you guys have always wanted to see the house, so see it? Let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
If anybody wants to know what it's like to be in the D-Log room, down your chin.
So these are still early days, right? And whichever project that we have embarked on, whichever partner we worked with, one thing was certain. Whether be it Google or be it the partner, in every single project we managed to push the creative envelope. What we know for sure is this. The story of the arc of storytelling interfaces now, currently, is more or less the story of the arc of computing interfaces. No wonder then, in the latest edition of the Cannes Festival of Creativity, we had a comprehensive sidebar of immersive media, and Google had been the most vocal proponent and participant in the same. What we know for sure is this. There's going to be some great content coming up in the space, great content that will get celebrated globally. And what I specifically look forward to is this, that some of that content which will get celebrated globally would be from people like you, here and now, in the space. I'm Chaitanya. I lead AR and VR for Google in India, and I look forward to working with you all in this journey from storytelling to story living. Thank you.